Hello everyone, and welcome back to HR Tech Trailblazers. I am Nico Simko. I'm one of the co-founders and the CEO of Claire, and I'm also one of the co-hosts of HR Tech Trailblazers. Today I'm super excited to have Shensi here with us. Shensi is the founder as well as the CEO of Merge. Shensi is a computer scientist at heart, but she has an incredible background. She worked for many years in investing. She worked as a chief of staff at a company that sold for $800 million, and then gave everything up and started Merge. For those who don't know, Merge is an API connectivity software company, and what they do is, for example, in the accounting space, they help accounting software connect to any apps out there. We're really excited to talk about it, because for many of you, you might ask, why is that such a relevant category? But I've been able to see the growth of Merge and the impact they've had. And so today, we're going to spend some time unveiling that. And with that, Shensi, welcome.
Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Thank you. And so let's start maybe with this. You, again, are a computer scientist. You could have done anything with your career. Why did you found Merge?
Yes, so I did not work professionally as a software engineer, so not anything. But I think what was really interesting was at my last company that sold for $800 million, we were in the cybersecurity space, and I saw that cybersecurity companies needed integrations, especially with ticketing services. And the P&L impact of building those integrations is really expensive. You end up having to hire a lot of engineers, having to maintain the integrations long term. You also have to pay partnership fees. There's a lot of cost behind that R&D expense. But not building those integrations, you also have a lot of opportunity costs. You can't close deals with companies that are using vendors you don't integrate with. And so I think seeing from a P&L perspective what the impact was of integrations on our business, I was just really interested in the space and wondering why no one had solved this before. And my co-founder, Gil, much better software engineer than I am, he had an interesting perspective of why this was a problem from the engineering side. So I think both of us were really intrigued by this and wanted to double click further.
So maybe to help the audience who might not know about the importance of integrations, maybe let's start with the first use cases that you've tackled at Merge, or some of the dominant use cases you've seen in the early days. What are they? And can you make it concrete for maybe the audience of, maybe some of them are listening, of what might be an opportunity there?
So we specifically focus on B2B integrations, and we never focus on internal ones. So we only focus on when you need to add integrations to your product. So one example is Ramp was actually one of our first customers, and we were very lucky that they took a bet on us when we were very small. So they have HRIS integrations for auto-provisioning employees. Whenever an employee joins a company, they get a Ramp credit card. You get their address, you get their manager, you get all the information that's helpful for an expense management use case. And instead of building 70 integrations one by one, they use Merge. It's a one-to-many API that allows you to integrate once to offer full category of integrations to your customers. And all the maintenance is not on Ramp, it's on Merge.
Okay, so let's talk about Ramp for a minute. If you use Ramp, or I'm assuming any Ramp equivalent, it is true that every time you have a new employee, you have to onboard them, but that data does not sit with Ramp, it sits either with the payroll system or the onboarding software. How did you get enough integrations with all the HRIS systems to then become, helpful to the Ramps of the world?
So when you're starting in this space, I think you don't really know how many you need. And for us, we just wanted as many as possible. And the ones that we could get access to in the beginning weren't really popular, but they were just the ones with free trials or free demos or open APIs. So I think we started off with 8. When we onboard our first customer, and then by the time we onboard a Ramp, we probably had 24. And at that point, it was a critical mass. Not all of them were super popular, but it was enough for them to have it on their marketing page and advertise that they had these integrations. But I don't know. I think anything is better than one, because building that first integration is still really expensive and time consuming, and then building the second one and third one, all of that really sucks. And so I think what you really need is just more than one. Right. And so even some of our customers actually who onboard now use us for just 2 or 3 integrations that are long tail that they just don't want to build because it's painful or they can't get access to it. So in any way that we are able to help customers, we're happy to help them.
Okay, so the first use case you're talking about is HRS data with spend software, spend technology, spend fintech. What is the following category after you've gone into this one? What's another example?
So we launched actually ATS and HRIS together. So my co-founder, who's head of engineering
sorry, what's ATS?
Yes, it's applicant tracking systems.
Okay.
So for recruiting systems, so like Greenhouse, Workday, iCIMS, Taleo, these platforms that help track a candidate's journey through the recruiting process. So we started with HR and ATS actually because my co-founder was head of engineering at a recruiting tech company. And what's interesting for recruiting tech companies, you have to build ATS integrations out of the gate. And it really is a TAM constraint if you don't have certain integrations. If someone's using Workday and you don't have a Workday integration, there's just no way they are going to manually add and update millions of candidates every single time there's an update. That's just not sustainable. So you have to have these integrations. But it's very difficult to get access, build for scale, and there's just a lot of data in these ATS platforms. Also a lot of like use cases with ATS is read and write. And so we thought it was an interesting category to pair with HRIS, which was mostly read only, more of a closed garden, and just less data. And so we wanted to make sure we were built for scale, and which ATS helped us do, and also support write use cases pretty early on. So we started with both of those, and it was really great to have that pair in the beginning. We started in 2020. There was a lot of hiring at the time. Right. There was also a lot of remote work platforms that were getting started. So it was really helpful for us to get our foot on the ground, especially with other startups that were getting started then.
And maybe I'm pushing this too far, but if I take, for example, ATS and HRS, and I think about how we hire people at Claire, all the data comes from the ATS, but then ultimately, once we hire someone, it goes to the HRS. So some of the customers that share data with you might become your own customers.
Yes, it's very common.
Have you seen that happen?
It's very, very common. So a lot of the HR platforms that we first partnered with 4 years ago, now are actually customers for other categories. So some of them will integrate with ATS platforms to see when a candidate has gotten hired, so they can just import that candidate. They'll also integrate with accounting systems because whenever there's a payroll run, you want to be able to post that journal entry as well. So yeah, there's a lot of interesting use cases that we didn't really expect back in the day when we first started, but we're very grateful that these partners are now customers. So one example is Bamboo HR, for instance, and same with remote.com.
It might sound like a crazy question, but how come you have been so successful at this? Because it sounds such a very logical thing that is needed in the world where software has eaten up the world, that these software solutions, especially in the B2B world, have to talk to one another. Why has no one figured that out?
So great question. And around 5 years ago, when we were starting to look into this idea, what was really, really popular at the time was internal workflows. So companies like Zapier, Workato, Tray were super popular, fundraising a lot of money, and everyone was really bullish on no code. And I think a lot of companies at the time thought that was just the answer. Like you'd buy 2 pieces of software, and then you'd buy a workflow product that would then connect the two. There were also just fewer vendor options back then. Whenever you bought a piece of software, they had the power to tell you, hey, sorry, we're not building this integration. It's on you to do that. But now, because everything's so competitive, there's so much VC funding, everything is so fragmented, the onus of offering integrations has moved from the buyer to the vendor. And that has really happened rapidly over the past 5 years. And I think because we were seeing at our own companies around 2019 that it was starting to become more of a problem, and that buyers and that our customers were saying no because there were other options out there that had these integrations, that it was going to be more and more of a problem. So I think just seeing that personally and really feeling the pain, that's why we had this early insight.
Okay, I love that. Well, this podcast is a lot around HR tech and fintech and how they come together. Let's focus on just the HR tech side of things. Some of our customers at Claire are large payroll companies, large workforce management systems. We do one specific thing for them that's not relevant for this conversation. What are some of the coolest use cases you've seen for HR tech, like HR tech companies? Think about payroll, think about workforce management that you've been able to unlock.
Yeah, I mean, accounting integrations have been really, really great because I think previously what was happening was you have to download a CSV for every payroll run and then upload that into your accounting system. Super, super manual. But I mean, a lot of these companies are starting to move into AI search. And so what they're also trying to do is not only pull information from accounting, but also use their existing payroll information and then also performance information too. So information from ATS systems, CRM systems, ticketing systems, just to see all the information that goes around an employee's profile and how they've been able to contribute to the business. So we're starting to see a little bit of that. It's very early days. And yeah, but there's some interesting movement in the space.
So Shensi, one of the things that we see at Claire in our domain, which is the world of EWA, is whenever a payroll company thinks about launching it, many times they would like for this to be embedded, but they don't have the resources to do it. So they end up having a marketplace solution where they put third-party solutions on the marketplace, and then the employer needs to contract directly with those solutions. And sometimes the employer have to also do the integration work, and sometimes it's manual work. Let's put ourselves in the shoes of a payroll company. How could Merge help them have a better marketplace?
Yeah, great question. The approach for a lot of companies that were sources of truth would be to launch an API, and then people would just come and then integrate with them, and they just felt like because they have market power, people would roadmap that. Unfortunately, it's just too competitive. There's too many companies to integrate with, and it takes too much time to build and maintain every single one. And so increasingly what's happening is that marketplace starts to slow down after you launch your API, or no one comes, and you end up having to beg vendors to spend that time integrating with you. So what Merge has been able to help a lot of these payroll companies is rapidly increase the number of companies that you're integrating with and put control of your marketplace back in your own hands. So instead of waiting for companies to roadmap you and begging them to do that, you're able to just integrate directly with them and then just add that company to your marketplace, and also have the power of what that workflow looks like. Because also, if another company is integrating with you, the quality of that integration might not be what you're hoping for. Timeline might be longer than you're expecting, and also just there might be data issues that you were hoping would not occur. So by being able to have control of those integrations and building them in-house, you're able to really improve your customer's experience. And we've been seeing this change from a lot of large companies that we really never thought would ever open up their marketplace or want to build or outsource integrations in the first place. So it's been really exciting seeing that change in the past year.
Shensi, you have a growing company that's been hyper successful. Success, we know, is a lot around focus. Which customers do you think are not successful with Merge? What are their characteristics? Where do you think maybe the category that Merge is working on integration is actually not the right fit?
Yeah. So one, always, if you're focusing on internal integrations and you're trying to use Merge, that's not a good use case. We'll just tell you it's not a good use case. The price point doesn't make sense. It doesn't really make sense to use this just for a one-to-one integration. You're just not going to have the best experience because it's not going to directly replicate building directly in the way that you're hoping for it to. In addition, you need to have an engineer, and a lot of times for internal use cases, you have a non-technical person owning the project. But also, we've seen some situations in HR that are a little bit stickier just because a lot of HR platforms don't support post use cases or patch use cases super well, unlike other categories. So one example is posting employees. Sometimes companies will come to us, they'll want to be able to post employees back to an HR system. It's very, very difficult to do this in an enterprise level way. You can add an employee very simple with like first name, last name. But if you're posting an employee to a payroll provider that has like complex tax implications, there's an unlimited number of fields that could help contribute to like what their tax status might be and how that impacts payroll. And so we generally just recommend not using us for that. Or if you want to build directly and use our pass-through, you can. We just can't really support you. It's just not super well supported, and then two, extremely complex in a way that won't give you a great experience because you're thinking that the onus will be on Merge. Another use case that is very difficult, and a lot of companies will claim that they can do this, but they can't, is post deductions and post benefits. You can try to do this, but it's just very, very, very difficult. It's not always supported by the API providers, and also support from those platforms. You'll need a lot of them. And the way that taxes and payroll is then impacted by whatever you're posting can vary pretty wildly in a way that is not always well documented.
You're an integrations expert. Can you talk about the difficulty of doing what we call write in the direct deposit or deduction files of payroll without direct integration?
Yes, it's very, very difficult. We've had several companies try to do that. And there's a lot of unpredictability with how the API providers respond to the post deductions, post payroll runs in a way that's just not consistent. It does require a deep partnership with those payroll providers because you just can't see it from their documentation. And we have seen a lot of companies attempt to do it. It's very, very hard. And most are not successful, except for maybe one or two platforms that they have an extremely close relationship with. Other companies that I've seen be successful with it have reverse engineered those APIs. That's also not a recommended way, just because then you're very beholden to that API provider not changing their internal APIs. They might sue you. There's a lot of different risks with that as well. But I think one approach that was interesting that I heard that you guys do is having the payroll providers integrate with the earned wage access providers. And in that way, it's a little bit more it's just de-risked because the payroll providers know like how they want to process payroll. They understand like how the taxes work, and being able to manage that in a more controlled method from their angle is just much safer, and it probably is a much better customer experience. In addition, there's like some verification, validation that you are a partner, which I think can also help a lot with like just crossing the chasm and just making the customer feel more comfortable using a third-party provider.
I love it. Thank you. Okay, let's talk about the future. What does Merge look like 10 years from now?
I mean, I want every company that needs integrations to be using Merge. I think whenever you're thinking about adding integrations to your product, you just think, I'm going to be using Merge. There's no reason why any company should be building integrations in-house. And just like how most companies don't like buy and maintain servers, you should also be doing the same with your integrations. You should be outsourcing that.
I love it. As clear as it gets. Thank you so much, Shensi.
Cool. Thanks for having me.